Hi! This time I had the main goal to try a very first time epoxy resin casting. Stay with me and I will show you how from epoxy resin, American walnut and cheap electronics I made this stunning LED night lamp. One of the main materials will be those American walnut pieces. Since I don't have a thickness planer, I ordered to prepare all work pieces of the required size. They all are in 20 by 20 millimeters. Talking about length, the longer ones are in 200 and the shorter in 120 millimeters length. The very first step is to glue every 4 pieces together by misaligning them in a random pattern. When the glue was dried, prepare the surface for the next glue up by sanding down to get a nice flat surface. The second glue up was similar to the first one. The only difference was that this time I glued 4 already pre-glued boards to a solid rectangular wood block. Glue dried and I got 2 solid walnut blocks. Used miter saw and flattened one end of each block. Sacrificial plywood pieces help to avoid any walnut tear-outs. Clean cut ends with the sandpaper. Take a look at that nice end grain. I used a palm router and milled a hole in the flat walnut block end. Here will be hidden all electronic parts. Drill 3 mm hole all the way through the block. Through this hole will be wired LEDs from top to bottom. I mixed a small part of the same epoxy resin which will be used later and covered all wood surfaces which will have a contact with epoxy resin pore. This should seal the wood and prevent the formation of air bubbles in the casting. I bought this fairy string LED light with 100 pieces of individual colored LEDs connected in line. It could be powered from any USB power source, like the power bank, smartphone charger, laptop, and etc. My fairy string light version had a controller that gives a few different operating modes. However, most of the time I'm planning to use this one. Constant light. Cut the power wire and managed it all the way through. I used hot glue to seal the hole and fix the wire in it. From random plastic that laid around, I start making the outer form for epoxy resin pour. Placed on a side a straight reference and adjusted to my preferred spacing of wood pieces. To seal up all edges, I used hot glue. All seams should be watertight, because the resin will find the smallest hole or crack and will flow out. I take my time and seal all joints to avoid the mentioned situation. On the top, I made a small barrier to keep epoxy resin overfill. Okay, the epoxy resin. I bought locally this highly transparent and UV stabilized epoxy casting resin. It is designed to use in the deep pores, like up to 10 centimeters. Mine will be only 8 centimeters deep, so it should work just fine. I poured the resin and hardener according to the indicated mixing ratio and mixed very well. After that, I gave a light transparent color tone by adding a few drops of turquoise pigment. Once again, a bit of mixing and I poured the resin into the form. This is very slow curing epoxy resin, so all bubbles will escape naturally. Here is the casting after 20 minutes. I can't see any of bubbles. This epoxy requires 3 days to fully cure, but I left it a bit longer. 1 week later, the resin was rock solid and it was the perfect time to remove from the mold. To clean all sides, I used a belt sander and 80 grit sandpaper. When the job was done here, I changed it to an orbital sander and passed with 120, 240 and 320 grit sandpaper. After that, moved to the finer grits and sanded by hand. Started with 400 grit, then 800 grit, 1000, and finished with 1500 grit sandpaper. To bring back the shine, I used 8 cm buffing pad on a drill and a regular automotive polishing paste. After a good 20 minutes of polishing, the shine is back. It is time to rework the electronic part so that it will fit in our prepared place. First of all, I need to desolder the power on-off button and relocate it. Second, I don't need this USB connector anymore, so it should be desoldered too. All electronics should fit inside this hole. I'm planning to relocate the power button here and the micro USB port to power up the light here. To fix the power button in needed place, I desoldered it from the main board and made a simple housing with extended 2 wires. To fix it in place, I use CA glue and activator. Soldered micro USB port to the power in terminal, extended wires from on-off button, and lastly soldered the fairy light wires. Finished up with some electric tape and hidden inside the hole. CA glue helped to fix permanently the micro USB port in needed place. With a thin piece of walnut and a few drops of wood glue, close the hole. For finish, I used Danish oil. At the moment, this is my most favorite product for finishing all kinds of wood. And here it is, clear epoxy resin and walnut fairy string LED lamp. As for the very first project with the epoxy resin casting, the result exceeded my expectations. Despite a few small mistakes made during the project, I'm more than happy with the finished product. It's a pity that the camera cannot transmit the real view of how it looks in real. If you ever tried to film a lamp or any light source, you understand my pain. By the way, do you remember those 2 offcuts left by flattening the main pieces? They weren't thrown out. I mean another, smaller and darker lamp version. I used epoxy resin made for casting for the first time, but certainly not the last. I will definitely use it again in the future, especially in the projects where I will combine several different materials by using epoxy resin. I hope this video was helpful. If you are first time here, please hit that subscribe button for upcoming videos. Thanks for watching it.